So today's topics are going to be on camera skills, really basic sort of what you need to know for camera skills. And then I'm going to hand over to Rachel. She's going to give her first introduction to food styling. And then when I come back to me, I'm going to show you some lighting techniques using natural daylight. This is the first camera that I had when I started off as a professional. You can see it has to be on a tripod. So I bought this to set up with, I suppose, set up as a photographer. And it's called a 5:4 camera. If I spin it round, the film goes in the back, 5 inches by 4 inches. Wow. You move it by using the tripod, and all your exposure is by using the lens at the front to set the 2 functions that you have, which are shutter speed and aperture, and your ISO settings, or the sensitivity, which is your 3rd function, would be in one of these things, in a double dark slide, they're called, and it's black, therefore it either means there's film that's exposed in it, or there isn't any film. And hey presto, actually there is some film. So you can see, actually that's now fogged film, you can see that. That's what it looked like. Crazy. So then, yeah, I mean, that's pretty big. You can really do any location work on it. So now, often, what I do now, if I'm on location, or I'm very busy, or working in a studio, I use my DSLR, which is the digital SLR. So it's sort of all the same bits. I suppose what the point I'm getting at is it's got all the same things that you would expect in a camera. And I find that people, when they often get a little bit intimidated by one of these cameras, or any camera that they're using, a digital camera. So really, what I would encourage you, what I say, is the main thing you have to really get to grips with when you're doing food is to really understand about exposure and focus. Now, very briefly on exposure, if your camera is in auto, any of the auto modes, basically the camera's deciding on the exposure and what it needs to be for the environment. So it'll decide on the 3 functions, the shutter, the aperture, and the ISO settings according to the light coming through the lens. Okay. Now, if you're outside, it can be pretty accurate and it's really good. But if you're working with food and you're indoors, it can sometimes overcompensate or undercompensate. So you sometimes need to adjust the exposure. So however you use your camera, you need to get to grips with adjusting that exposure. Now for me, and for when I teach on the courses, the easiest way is to put it in manual and then use the 3 functions independently, which is your shutter, aperture, and ISO. And I would encourage you to really get to grips with that and really understand how it works. So you need to be able to control it to either make it brighter or darker. Okay, and you need to know how to do that confidently and quickly. Now, when the camera is in the semi-auto modes, which some of you may know is either fully auto, P, S, or A, or AV, sometimes known as, you can change it, but you need to override it with the override button, which is in here, which on my camera is a little plus button there. But as you can imagine, it just gets a bit complicated. And if you do change the button, then it will always be plus or always be minus. As you can imagine, you just forget. So again, I would really recommend where you can on your camera, put it in manual and use the shutter and the aperture and the ISO independently, using that little screen to go either slightly brighter or slightly darker. As a general rule, food is better when it's brighter, but you need to be able to know that it's going to benefit when it's darker. As well as that, you need to make sure that in the style of it, you might want to make a darker picture. So the exposure comes into play. On the other hand, you might want to make a healthy, bright lifestyle picture. Therefore, you've got to make it brighter in the exposure. So you can see how important it is for exposure.
Hi, everybody. As Bill said, I'm just going to give you a few tips on food styling. Firstly, I'd say as a general rule, we shoot everything from cold. Yeah, A, because it stays fresher under the camera, and then B, because I cook everything in advance. If I was doing a photo shoot, I'd have it all done an hour while the photographer's setting up his set, and I'd really concentrate on each ingredient. So if I show you today, I'm just going to show you a simple recipe. It's just literally noodles, broccoli and chicken. And so here I've got the noodles. So with noodles and pasta, I always undercook just so they hold their shape. With a general rule, I undercook everything. So then I've got some broccoli. So to keep the colour of the broccoli, if it's broccoli, any green vegetable, al dente, I just cook it very slightly and then run it under fresh cold water to keep its colour as best as possible. And then I've got for this recipe some chicken. So I've just poached the chicken and then I've just shredded some here. When I'm doing it for photography, I'm always thinking about how it's going to look under the camera, the way I prepare it, because you really want it to look exactly as it is. So this is chicken if you're doing fish, salmon, whatever. You just really want it to look exactly what the actual ingredient is. So I've just got noodles, broccoli and chicken, and then spring onions to garnish. And then I've got a dressing. It's just a sesame seed and oil dressing. And then I'm going to put a little bit of that in with the ingredients, and then I'll put it on the plate. Firstly, I was just going to say, so I've got my plate here. So you will have done your setup, as Bill was saying, under the camera, ready for your food. And so you'll have either decided whether you're going to do it overhead or three-quarters. If you're doing it overhead, when I'm doing the food, I'd literally look straight over the plate like this. And so I'd put the food on so, as if I was the camera. And I'd generally fill the plate up. And it's easier doing overheads than three-quarters because you've just got to fill the plate up and you don't have to worry about the height. When you're doing a three-quarter shot, I'd always put it onto a saucepan or something raised level so that when I'm looking at the food and doing it, it's as if I'm the camera. So for today, I'm going to do it as a three-quarter shot just because I think it's the more challenging one. I'm going to do mine on the kitchen top because if I put it on the saucepan, we were playing around with it before and you wouldn't be able to see the food. Okay, so when I'm doing my shots, I've got all my ingredients ready, and as I said, I mostly cook them all separately so I can get them just how I want them. I'm just going to put some noodles into the bowl. So I've put some oil through them just so they don't stick. You really want them to be completely free-flowing because pasta can stick. I'm just going to add some of the chicken and then the broccoli. You can see. Okay, I'm just going to make the broccoli a little bit smaller. So I'm just going to mix it through with my hands. I always use my hands for photography and when I'm putting it on the plate, just I think because you get a better feel of the food. And then I'm just going to put a little bit of the dressing on. So I won't put too much in. I literally just put in a little bit. So if it was something like a curry or something with a thick sauce, I would thin down the sauce with some water. And again, I'd only put a little bit into it, mix it around, put it on the plate. And then when we put it onto the camera, we would then spoon more sauce over right at the last minute, just so it looks as fresh as possible. You don't want to drench the food in the sauce in case it covers up the ingredients. Okay, so I've mixed all this together in my bowl, and then I'm just going to put some on the plate as if I was doing it for the camera. So the first thing is don't be too tempted to put too much on the plate. So I'm literally just going to get a little bit, and I'm just going to see where it falls. I know you can't see. I'm going to turn the plate around once I've done it. Okay, so I'm just literally seeing where the food falls. It's just going to fall quite naturally because otherwise you end up with quite a staged plate of food, a bit like how it was all sort of shot probably back in the 70s, you know, whereas now people even on packaging are looking a lot more natural look. Okay, so I'm just going to get another handful and I'm just trying to make sure the chicken and the broccoli stay in sight so you can see everything. And I'm trying to keep a good height on the food. So I'm just trying to get bits that aren't stuck together. And so I'm just going to put a bit more on top just to make sure I've got that height. I'm just going to fiddle around with the broccoli a bit just so we can see it. And I'm just going to put a little bit of chicken because then you can just add bits of food. And that's why you want to don't be tempted to put too much on at the beginning because you can easily add as well when it goes onto the camera. So I'm just adding a little bit more food, a little bit more of the chicken. I've got the broccoli. When it's under the camera, I mostly use my tweezers to pull things out. I'm just going to do that slightly here actually. I'm just putting a few of the noodles out just to make it look a bit more natural. And I'm going to just put a couple on the plate just as if the food's sort of fallen down. As I said, just to keep it as natural as possible. I'm just putting some around the back. It's quite hard because as I said, I'd normally have it on a saucepan so I can see it sort of in my line of vision. Okay, so I'm going to turn this around so that you can see it. Can you see how I've kept a height on it? And then you can see all the ingredients, it's just the chicken and the broccoli. And then what I would do is I'd carry it over to the set, to the photographer, we'd put it down, we'd chat about it a bit, maybe add a few more ingredients. And then at the very end, I'd spoon over some of the dressing like this. and I'd make sure sun was on the plate, drizzling out, and then you have to shoot the shot quite quickly then so that you can see little pools of the dressing on the plate. And then this instantly freshens it up just by putting the dressing on. If you didn't have a dressing, or it's a different type of recipe, or on meat particularly, I've just got oil and water here, and then I would just dab it onto the meat or whatever it is, just to freshen it up. I mean, it might be under there for about half an hour under the camera while you're setting up your lighting and everything. And then also the other thing to keep it fresh is this little spray. You can get these from most chemists, to be honest. And then that's always good, just to give it a quick spray over the food, and that keeps it really fresh.
So let's just do some basic rules of using natural light. Okay, so first of all, just use one light from one direction. I have got a couple of studio lights that I've lit up just so I'm not silhouetted. So normally if I'm shooting, no lights. So you're looking for a window that doesn't have sun coming through. It doesn't have strong sunshine. So it needs to be a window that is either north facing, or if it does face the sun, you can really only use the window on a sort of cloudy day. So the reason is you don't want a contrast hard light. What you want is a diffused soft light, which is exactly what we've got here. I'm very fortunate here. We've got this bay window that sits in the north, and so it works really well. You don't want any top lights. I have noticed that using any top lighting kills and just doesn't help the food. So that would be like a top window from a conservatory, or like one of those kitchen dormer lights. Often I've worked with clients where they've got a fantastic kitchen, but it does have some sort of ceiling light in the building. It's been built in. You need to cover them. You want just the one light from one direction coming from a basic window. The best angle generally I use, I'll put that up there, is what I call a side light. So the light, you're the camera, you're aiming here, or even overhead. It doesn't really matter what your angle is, but the light's coming from the side. That's the same as the other side. You could stand that side, but at the moment the light's coming from the right. Somebody asked me once, does it make any difference? Just maybe culturally, I think we like the light coming from the right. Sometimes I just flip it around and I do it from the left just to be different, but it's a side light. Good things for side lights. Solid things, side lit. So you get the shape of a solid item, and I'm using this as a lemon as a demonstration, but it is good to practice with bowls and fruit. So what would be a solid thing? Pies, cakes, patisseries, cupcakes. Perfect for side light, really nice. It gives a lovely texture, and it brings out any texture as well in any of the food. So if you're photographing a solid thing, side light. Another good angle, and I'm not going to go in front of the camera, but it's basically from this position. So the camera's going to be there. So it's a backlight, yeah? So it's reflecting back. Now, the good things about backlight is things like salads and translucent things. What would be a translucent thing? Maybe a very sort of homemade pasta, berries, red currants, sugary type things, that sort of love the light coming through it, will really benefit from a backlight. However, if you have a backlight, also it will show up any shiny oil, fingerprints on the plate, smears, anything that may look a bit untidy will really show up on a backlight. So it does have its pros and cons, but so what I often do sometimes is I shoot from this angle, which is, I call 3/4 light, which has a bit of side light and a bit of backlight. So you get the best of both worlds. So if you imagine the camera's from this side and you are getting this lovely backlight over there, if you have any smears or any shines that you want to control, you would use some black card. And you would use card to flag off anything over here that's backlighting the food to get rid of any shine or smears. It really helps things like soups and sauces to bring out the colour. So those are the three angles. I'll just repeat them again. Side light, 3/4, backlight. That's it. And I want you to really work to those 3 angles. It works every time. Thanks a lot. Goodbye, everybody.